Boop. Oh, our
Did you remember
sound's
hit
on.
play
Let
on
me
the?
put the sound off. Okay, go
There you
ahead.
go. Okay,
Take it away.
so
Zach.
you might be asking yourself, why is Zach reviewing Spider-Man again? Well, if you've been paying attention to the show, you know that I said I was going to do this. A few weeks ago, I did review Marvel Spider-Man for PlayStation 5. It's the remastered version. And we kind of did that. I was going to do this all at once, but we needed a review that week, and Paul was like, "No, do this in 2 reviews." So I did. I've separated out the DLC, which is called The City That Never Sleeps, I believe, and the Miles Morales. It's a standalone game, but it's really just an expansion. There's not enough content there to actually call it its own game.
Well,
So
it's
this,
got price too, right?
yeah, I bought them all together.
Oh, okay.
So I don't actually know what the price differential is.
I think they originally released it only like $20 or something like that.
I think it was 30, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a day one drop with the PlayStation 5, which is kind of cool. Point to its credit, excuse me. And oh dear, I forgot to update the notes here. Hang on. Let's make for great air. Okay, so it was developed by Insomniac Games, like I said, for a day one drop on PlayStation 5. That is November the 12th of 2020. It was basically taking some of the characters that were established in the mainline Sony Spider-Man game that you got to play a little bit. You got to run around and do some sneaky stuff as Miles, and throughout the plot of the original game, you do see Miles get bit by the spider and awkwardly call Peter and be like, hey buddy, I got spider powers now. And they did tighten up a lot of the mechanics, things that I didn't expect to be like I found myself wondering, why did they try to fix what's not broken? But also I don't care because it's better. It's a very rare instance of fixing what's not broken and actually succeeding. But narratively, it just kind of falls flat on its face. Chamali is.
And it was originally $50. Chamali's wrong too. It was $49.99.
Okay, so yeah,
that's
$49.99.
That's too much.
That's too much for a glorified expansion, and that was the biggest concern of mine. So this is only available on PlayStation 5, and it just seemed. There just seemed like a lot of things that were off, and the expansion or the DLC for the main game actually had some problems unique to itself, and I'll get to that in a minute. What did I like about the game? I mean, it was more Spider-Man. Like there's nothing to hate there. The web swinging is fun. They changed the soundtrack and a lot of the location like specificity to match more of what Miles would be experiencing in his.
Is it in a different borough of New York, or
it's the same map as the original, but it's winter first of all. So they new terrain stuff.
I like that.
But it is mostly centered around Harlem, where Peter's stuff is actually pretty well dispersed across the entirety of New York City.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like it's an enjoyable like mechanical experience, and it still feels like just playing out a comic book, but it feels like they started with like Brian Michael Bendis caliber Spider-Man writing, and then brought in like some C-list writer for the Miles content. And really, I see that as a disservice to Miles. I may not be his biggest fan. I'm a classic Spider-Man fan. I love Peter Parker. I think he's great. But I do appreciate them trying to shake it up every now and again. And everything they introduced for Miles just kind of seemed hand-wavy. They gave him a hand-me-down suit from Peter to start with. And I was like, oh, that's hideous. It doesn't fit him right. He honestly looks as silly as the Bombastic Bagman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was weird. Fortunately, the game comes with the Into the Spider-Verse costume, which I just immediately threw on because it's close.
Yeah, and it changes up the animations too.
They
like
should have
the
just
first
done
one.
like an Into the Spider-Verse expansion in and of itself. That would have been
Yes.
rad.
Yeah.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I think using the Spider-Man engine
Yeah.
as an Into the Spider-Verse game would have been
Yeah.
so cool and so much fun. Excuse me. So while it was fun and I'm glad I did it and I enjoyed it, it just wasn't as good as the original, and neither was the DLC. So like I said, mechanically it was good, but the voice acting was like whatever, forgettable. The character development was ignorable. I didn't actually find myself attached to any of the characters. I got excited when you hear when you hear Yuri Lowenthal as Peter in your head, or like in your cell phone earwig or whatever. None of the characters, like even Prowler, who is a character that I really, really like, and like honestly, I 3D printed a Prowler mini, even though I haven't 3D printed Miles, because I like that character. His design was boring. They somehow managed to ruin the Tinkerer. I'm like, that's a rad character. What are you doing?
The Tinkerer.
Yeah.
How do they ruin the Tinkerer?
Well, they made it. Spoiler alert! They made it Miles's best friend.
Oh, okay.
And she's just like, "Oh, hey, I'm the Tinkerer now." And Miles is like having an existential crisis over it. And I'm like, I couldn't care less about this character. What are you doing? None of the big names come into play. Like Rhino shows up a couple of times, and you beat him pretty easily. The Prowler fight is just like you shock him 3 times and he's done. It just seems like they put no thought into making it feel unique and exciting.
It almost sounds like they just like slapped it together really fast just to put something out
really
as a launch
like
title.
I was gonna say that like I feel like they didn't have enough for Spider-Man 2, and they were like, what can we get out by PlayStation launch?
Right. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sony went to Insomniac and was just like, hey, we want Spider-Man 2 to launch on the PS5. And they're like,
best we can do is
we'll give you this. And so meh. Now, so yeah, it just like everything seemed to fall flat. And in the case of the DLC, it was more Peter Parker content, but there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason behind any of it.
So I played the DLC also, and it definitely felt like we need some content to make some money off of.
Yeah, exactly. The boss fights were way too difficult, like without any reason to be. I can understand if they had more unlockable like abilities or something like that, or some other thing to get you excited about this. I can see ramping the difficulty up and making it harder because you're out to gain those abilities. The only thing that gave you was extra suits. And the only suit I'm using is the one that looks like classic Spider-Man. I don't even like the white one that they packaged the game with. I think that one looks stupid.
Yeah, I hate the PlayStation, the Insomniac suit.
Yeah, it's terrible. So they turn up the difficulty dial to 11. I find myself, RPD said this is like Spider-Man Dark Souls.
I didn't find the bosses as hard as I found like the Silver Sable.
The Silver Sable fight and the Silver Sable minions.
Yeah, the minions.
They were so hard.
Where you have to clear out their base.
It was so annoying.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, that's I think when we coined the term Spider-Man Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Because we just kept banging our heads against the same wall. I finally discovered that if you just keep moving around the rafters until you're and dodging every now and again until your meter is full and just do the web spin, that's the easiest way to take them out.
Web spin,
and then it just got boring.
Yeah.
So it just,
but it also felt like there was like one DLC's story stretched over 3.
Exactly.
That like it should have been 3 different villains. It should have been 3 different stories, and it was
and that's how comic books are told. Like, I love the idea of like, let's have a Monster of the Week expansion. Give me if I would be totally.
Let me just fight the lizard for this. It doesn't need to be like a whole big thing. Like it's
Give me like a little bit of story, and then I beat down lizard in a bank.
I'm fine just fighting Shocker who robbed a bank, and we're good.
Yeah, and that would feel more like a Spider-Man experience, especially as a comic fan, than anything we got in the city that never sleeps.
You fight Hammerhead twice.
Yeah.
You fight regular Hammerhead and then Cyber
powered
Hammerhead.
up Hammerhead, and the powered up Hammerhead is 100 times easier.
Yeah, yep.
It was really, really disappointing. That said, like, a disappointing Spider-Man game is still a Spider-Man game.
Best Spider-Man game I ever played was an iPhone game called Rope and Swing, and it's just a side scroller, and you basically, it's just like a one-touch thing, like one touch to shoot your web, one touch to release it, and you try and see how far you can launch yourself. And dude, honestly, it was so addictive and fun. Like, best Spider-Man game I've ever fucking played.
Some people call that Ninja Rope, or was that like a different version?
Maybe it was a different version, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm with Jamali. I think Spider-Man 2, for whatever it came out on, it was a bunch of things, was my favorite Spider-Man game. Although
it was for me until
really
the
liked
PS5.
Yes, right. I really liked Shattered Dimensions. I did. I'm like the only one who did.
I haven't played it still. That's on my list.
Really enjoyed it. Neil Patrick Harris voicing Spider-Man was terrific.
Wasn't there a bunch of different?
Yeah, there's 4. There was 4,
and they had what's his name from the show do one of them.
I believe he was
from the '90s show. I think he was Spider-Man Noir.
Was he? Maybe. I don't remember. That game was great. I really liked it. And the sequel was fine too. Like, I didn't have a problem with either of them. But no, Spider-Man PS5 itself was really good. The sequel content was just not strong. The art, and I will say the art style that they chose for Miles Morales was really, really, like, it made sense. They didn't try to push the boundaries in any way. They didn't try to go fully into the Spider-Verse, whatever. But they kind of did a nice balance between what we got in the original game and Into the Spider-Verse. So that was pretty cool. The music was, again, very apropos. There's a lot of hip hop and rap inspiration in this one, which is not something I generally like go out of my way to listen to, but I do have an appreciation for as a musician myself. Like, I appreciate kind of anything musically. So it was cool to see that sort of paint the stage for Miles, where it's much more classic orchestral arrangements for Peter. The sound design was exactly the same. There was nothing different about Miles Morales or the expansion content than we got in the original game. So there's nothing exciting there. How long did it take me? Well, Miles Morales took me 3, 6, 9. Let's call it 10 hours. So it was really short, and the DLC was like 6 hours, maybe. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was very short.
Yeah. So yeah, not very long. Would I play a sequel? Oh, hell yeah. I mean, Adam and I have already talked about this. Like, if and my fingers are crossed, if we get multiplayer in Spider-Man 2, it is like Donkey Kong.
It looks like there's going to be multiplayer in Spider-Man 2. I think it's all but confirmed.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm hoping Venom's playable. Like,
that'd be so cool. I would play it if Venom's playable.
I also hope that, but that means they're going to have to introduce Carnage.
Maybe, but it seems like Kraven the Hunter is the main villain, and it seems like Venom is versus Carnage. I mean, no, Venom is versus Kraven.
That's going to be interesting.
That's what
I'm okay with
kind
that.
of teased. It felt like, but
I do think, like, Adam and I were goofing off and calling dibs on characters. I called dibs on Peter, and Adam goes, "I got dibs on Venom. It's fine." I'm like, "Well, you're gonna have to play Miles until you get Venom, but that's fine." But admittedly, like, the changes that they made, the electricity attacks for Miles are actually incredibly fun. You hit someone with that electrical discharge, and the haptic feedback on the PS5 controller goes bananas. It's so cool. And I mean, you feel it. You feel that energy go through, and that was far and away the best part of that expansion. And I think they're testing new ground that we will see in both Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine.
Nice.
So yeah, I will definitely play a sequel. Very excited about that. So here it comes down to the overall rating and impression. For the original Spider-Man game, I gave it. Let's see if I can find it on the list here. That'd be pretty high. Yeah, I gave it a 9.1. So it was a very high rating. I really, really like that game. But for this DLC stuff, like, I mean, I'm looking down the list and I just keep going. Like, it was not as good as Battle Network. It wasn't as good as Space Marine. It wasn't as terrible as Mall. It wasn't as terrible as Mall Brawl. I got to put it at like a 6.2.
Dang.
That's rough.
That is rough.
It's just, I mean, it's not good.
Just based on the DLC, I would agree with you though that it's just like we gotta put something out. Like,
so here's a question then. If you bought this game having not played the original and you bought just the Miles Morales content, would your score still be a 6.2? Probably
not, but you'd have to be a pretty big fan of Miles Morales in order to do that.
Interesting, yeah.
But the other thing is, if you're gonna,
I'm guessing it only really gives it like a couple points though. If it's
it does. It doesn't put it above 7. It's like maybe a 6.6, 6.7.
Wow.
Like it's not a full game, and that's the big problem. And the fact that they distributed it with a copy of the original, like, I don't even know I guess you can buy it standalone, but like, why would you? It just doesn't make any sense. The other thing that we noticed, and I had Adam, our friend Cody Arnanoff, in my chat when we noticed it, in the DLC, they didn't enhance the DLC. It's the original PS4 game. They didn't change it.
So there is a next gen update, but like, so it might be that you needed to go and do that, but
maybe. But like, the original face skin is there.
Weird.
And I was like, what? So when you see Peter take off his mask, I'm just like, that doesn't look like he looked in the main game. What gives? And Arn goes, oh, that's the original. That's the PS4 face. I'm like,
wow, he's got PS4 face.
Like, why?
Yeah.
Although we did have a couple of really funny moments. RPD wanted me to call out the moment that we deliberately visited Uncle Ben's grave in Peter's underwears.
Oh, that's disrespectful.
Wow.
Disrespectful.
Wow.
Yeah, there were a couple of good moments just throughout the DLC and throughout Miles Morales, just that had us laughing. But really, like, that was the extent of it. Like, there was a couple of key moments.
It sounds like it was made by the B team, and like it probably was. Like, or it sounds like it feels like it was made by the B team.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I think that's kind of been an issue with Miles entirely.
Yeah,
except for
Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
And I will also say that when Bendis was writing him, his comics were arguably better than Peter's in some ways.
I disagree. I didn't like Bendis's writing for him, and I don't think that he did enough to distinguish Miles from anything. I think that the movie gave him 100% of everything valuable about his character.
That's okay. But I'll give you that.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But they took someone who I thought was basically a saltine cracker in a Spider-Man suit and gave him a personality in the movie.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like the game version of him does enough to distinguish him either.
No, he like I said, the characters surrounding him are completely forgettable. I don't think I could name a single one of them, except for his mother, Rio Morales, because she's in the original game.
Yikes.
But
I remember her and his dad and from the original.
Right. Yeah. And I guess Aaron Davis the Prowler, but like that's Prowler. Like, I can't remember his guy in the chair's name. I can't remember his best friend's name, other than she was the Tinkerer, I guess. I don't remember the main villain's name. That's pretty colossal.
I don't remember the main villain's name.
No, I have no idea. I have zero idea. And granted, you don't actually fight him. He just gets arrested at the end.
What?
Who is he? What's he doing?
Some businessman guy, runs a security company.
That feels bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
I don't even have any skin
Like-
in the game with this, but that
like-
feels bad.
And like Shamali asked me the other day, is it worth playing? And I'm like, no,
Dang.
it's just not. Unless you have it. Like,
well, thank
I was, I played through all those Batman games and I played through the first Spider-Man game, and I'm like, well,
thanks for saving me.
Yeah,
time.
I guess if you have it and you just want to
That's-
do more web slinging, yeah.
yeah, that's all it is. And the collectibles are just as stupid. You run around, you get the stuff, and you're just like, well, I did that.
We should do an episode on collectibles. We talked about it. We didn't really flush out the ideas, but we should do an episode on collectibles and collectathons because I think there's a lot to be spoken about there. And that also speaks to a certain type of gamer, which is not me. But yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's something we could dive into. Speaking of, do you want to wrap this up and we'll get into our topic?
Yeah. I mean, thanks to everybody who tuned in to watch me play those games. That part of it was fun. But boy, if I was just playing this for myself, I don't know that I would have enjoyed it.
Cool.
Wow. All right.
That's wild. All right.
A harsh review for the new Spider-Man. More 11.
Okay.